Hello, everybody. This is Brian Spivey. I'm back to talk to you more about mapping out growth for assessment-capable learners. Now we're looking at part 2, where we're going to provide you with an example of using proficiency scales to create assessment-capable learners. In this video, I'm going to show you a pre-made example of a proficiency scale that has been enhanced to be a tool for students to set goals and monitor their progress. Then in a later video, I will take you on a walkthrough of the process. So before we get started, I want to thank Dr. Bonnie Cameron at Edgren High School and Allison Lewis at Anderson Middle School for your help in the development of this tool. I could not have done it without you. Your input was invaluable to me. So now I'm going to show you an example of how we can turn this incredible tool into something students can use to set goals and monitor their progress. For this portion, I will walk you through what I am calling a student growth map. Since we discussed speaking and listening standards earlier today, this example is going to show you the grade 6 speaking and listening standard number 1 that focuses on collaborative discussions. This tool supports assessment capable learners by providing two things. One is, as you can see, a proficiency scale that maps out the path to and beyond proficiency. And then the second portion is a graphic organizer that helps students to examine their work, track their own progress, and set future learning goals. You will be provided with a template for creating one of these maps, so feel free to modify that to meet the needs of your students. As you can see, the top portion here just covers general information. The name and unit of study, you may want to add more to that, but this is just going to help the students to keep their work organized in case you're keeping a portfolio or class folder or something along those lines. Next, we have our priority standard. Step 1 says that we need to determine the topic, and we get that information from our standards. So the next thing we do there is enter our priority standard. As stated earlier, we're going to use the grade 6 speaking and listening standard number 1 for this example. And in order to get this standard, I went to DoDEA's College and Career Ready Standards website. And really all I did was I went in and I copied the standard. Then I went back into our document and I pasted it in, did a little bit of formatting, and then I just added a link back to the standard site. Now this standard is an exception because it is broken down into substandards that create their own learning targets. So the list is longer than it might be with another standard. But here you can see the standard, and then you can see the substandards which create our learning targets that we have for this standard. Some standards you will have to deconstruct them and create learning targets. But as you can see, I just went in here, copied the substandards, and then pasted them in as bullet points. And I just made them a little bit more specific to focus on the verbs in the standards. So the next thing we're going to do is look at level 3, our target content. Level 3 is the foundational level of your proficiency scale. Because this is a tool that is designed for student use, we want to take the learning targets we just wrote and convert them into I can statements or some other student-friendly terminology. You still want to keep the key terminology from the standard. You just want to get rid of some of the complex or awkward phrasing. For example, I converted read and understand the required material well enough to contribute to a discussion using evidence from that material to support my ideas, into study the required material to understand enough to contribute to a discussion, use evidence to support my ideas, really focusing on the verbs there, the actions that the students need to do. And I went through the same process for each standard, and I came up with these learning targets. You can see they're kind of split there between two pages, but they're there. So that's once you have broken up your learning targets into I can statements for the students, which, by the way, it's really a good idea, I think, to have the students participate in this because, and I stated that in the last video, this gives them some ownership and lets them see the standard from the inside out. So the next thing we do is we go to level 2. And this is just looking at the vocabulary related to the target content. And we take that vocabulary and we record it here in level 2. So what I did for that was we're looking at some of the key words that were found in the standard itself, words that the students are going to need to understand in order to really engage in the skills in the standard. So you can see some of these words: required material, contribute to discussion using evidence, collegial discussions, for instance. We've also got the word perspectives and a few other things in there, words that students might know, but really need to have a functional understanding of that word within the context of what you're teaching them. So what we're looking at here for the first part of level 2 is students will independently demonstrate their understanding of specific vocabulary as it applies to collaborative conversations. Now, what I will do is change this to an I can statement. I can independently demonstrate my understanding of specific vocabulary as it applies to collaborative conversations or discussions, as the standard language says, and picked out some of these. And once again, some of these words are words that sixth graders will have heard, but do they have a functional definition of those words? And I once again want to point out that this isn't just a list of words. These are important ideas and concepts that are part of what they're trying to learn. For instance, with the word collegial, how many sixth graders really know the word collegial and how that functions? But that's an important part of the standard, so we want to expand their thinking and teach them those terms. They might have heard the word elaboration if they've had any sort of writing instruction, but what does that mean in a speaking and listening context? Understanding these terms is going to make the learning target more clear. For instance, if you were teaching photosynthesis, students would need to know terms like chlorophyll and glucose because those are key elements of the process. So our next step is step 4, determining additional simple content and then recording it in level 2. Because this is a skills-based standard in which students must perform specific actions, I also included some foundational skills that are the bedrock of collaborative discussions. These are the skills that students must at least be aware of in order to participate in a collaborative discussion. And once again, we're looking at independently identifying and explaining these components of collaborative discussions. Can they summarize the assigned material? That will demonstrate that they do understand it. Can they identify the primary ideas or concepts that are supported in the assigned material? So this list of skills here are things that they need to do before they can move to the more complex skills in our target level. So for our next portion here, we're going to jump up to level 4. And this is step 5, identify the examples of how a student might demonstrate a level 4 performance, which is moving beyond the standard. And so there are different ways they could do this, but I thought that a good way to go beyond the standard is not only to participate in a discussion. Um, this is where a situation where a student could move beyond the standard by facilitating a discussion. And what this does is it provides space for a student to move beyond the standard, just like we provided space for students to approach the standard. But because some students may come into your classroom already having mastered the skills or content in the standard, and they need a greater challenge. This is what level 4 is for. So once again, the work on this level should be more complex, but you're not piling extra work onto them just to make it harder. So in this example, we're adding complexity to the task by having the student not only participate in the discussion, but as we said, to facilitate the discussion. That makes the task more complex because the student must guide others through the process, not just select points of participation. This requires a deeper understanding of the components of a collaborative discussion. A student need not perform all of these tasks, but stepping up in this way gives each student a chance to step beyond the standard and challenge themselves to learn and grow more. So now we're going to move down to some things that I specifically added to this proficiency scale. I included levels 1 and 0 to the scale to give students the opportunity to identify the areas where they need help and then to seek out that help from a teacher or from a peer. This is the sixth and final step of the process, determine means and levels of support needed. This is very important because it creates a space on the scale for students who are struggling just to find a starting point. They can pick one skill from level 2 or choose to acquire the key vocabulary terms. And this can be a great data source for teachers to differentiate within a lesson because some students might walk in already having some of those level 2 skills, where other students will have to work on acquiring those skills. But we mentioned self-advocacy before, and the important thing is for students to be able to identify where they are and then get the help they need, the support they need, the resources they need in order to get to that next level, to acquire those next level skills. So this portion of our tool, of our map, lays out the learning targets, which is the first thing in having an assessment capable learner, is giving them clear learning targets. So we're going to scroll down to the next portion, and we're going to look at our student growth goals. So now that those targets have been clearly established and communicated, you give students a chance to set goals and monitor their progress. First, students record the data and then they assess their abilities to determine where on the proficiency scale they are. Teachers should communicate that since they have not been given any instruction, it is realistic to start off no higher than level 2. That's very important. We don't want kids feeling bad because they're not starting out at proficiency. And this is where your instruction starts. Students then write down the skills they're currently working on in the current task column, and then at the end of the lesson, they will reflect on anything they successfully learned, any questions they need answered to clarify fuzzy ideas or concepts, and what they intend to work on next. So really clarifying what they've learned and what they need to do to move up a level. This allows the students to choose their own path towards proficiency and gives you the data points that you need to meet both the larger group's needs and each individual needs. It helps students to take on an active role in their learning and possibly provide assistance to their peers. I have often been asked how students should fill this form out. So there are different ways to approach it depending on the length and the depth of your lesson. Really, anytime they acquire a new skill or fresh content, they should update their growth goals. This gives them an opportunity to see their progress and to have the fulfillment of tasks completed. So that is our example of a student growth map utilizing the proficiency scale and the growth tracker. In our next video, I'll break down a standard step-by-step in real time and walk you through this process.